Hello everyone. Welcome to another video on Code Tech and Tutorials. Today I'm going to be talking about this game engine I'm building, Ancient Archer, and the changes I've made since the last build. So now we're on build 4, and yeah, just going to go over the changes. Obviously this isn't production ready or anything like that, and this is like my own personal project. I only talk about it on the channel because it's code and I know about it and it's something that people can learn from. But as far as who owns it and all that, it's like my personal project. So I want to start talking more about libraries and stuff like this on the channel, and this is just a great jumping off point for me. So we're going to talk about the main changes. I'm going to walk through some of the code, show you some of the stuff, and we'll kind of go from there, and you guys can take what you want from it. And yeah, let's just get into it. All right, so build 4, I mainly focused on basically trying to make this a more proper static library, because I noticed something as I was like building this on other computers and then exporting the library and like starting new projects with this library, because that's basically what it's intended to be. So basically, just like any other C++ library, you're supposed to build a library and then link your real project to it and use the library to support all the stuff you're doing. So that's still the intention of this. There's a lot of other libraries like this. I've talked about them a little bit. There's like Earlicht and what else? I don't know. There's a few others, but this is kind of a common thing for people to do, and that's, you know, I'm just doing it mostly for practice and because I actually want to make a game with it. And basically I'm too lazy to learn other people's tools. No, that's not entirely true, but I just feel like there's a lot to learn by building your own tools, even if it's already been done. So that's kind of the point. All right, main changes. The core is now private, and that doesn't really mean anything in itself, but basically I factored out a lot of the things that were in the public header files that weren't really supposed to be public, and I put them in this core, and this core is like completely private. There's nothing the end user of the library can do to like change any of this core stuff permanently. So that might not be the best way of wording it, but basically it's like the core functionality of this whole engine that shouldn't be messed with. Only, you know, you can toggle stuff on and off and stuff like that, but yeah, it's all in core. So all that private stuff that's like the back-end support of the engine got factored out. And yeah, I guess the main reason for that also is several main reasons. The public header files like the ancientarcher.h and ancientarcher.cpp, they were getting huge, and everything in the CPP was supposed to be private anyway, but I had like a bunch of stuff that didn't have public access functions, so I just put that in the core, and it's a little weird still. I'm still working out some kinks, but it seems a lot better. It's a lot easier to reason about, because as this grows, it becomes more and more complicated to reason about, and I'm often just changing things to try to simplify using it in the future. All right, I fixed some texturing support. So there were some issues with alpha and non-alpha textures, and I added a few upload functions that now will actually properly use alpha or not alpha as you prefer. So before, I think I was missing one of them, and I forget. But I basically fixed that up and added a few things that were missing. Internal shaders. This is something I've gone back and forth on, and I'll talk about it a little bit, but basically the whole reason for putting the shaders in a .h file, and they're just now like const strings. Alright, where do I start with this? Shaders are complicated. There's a lot of different ways to handle them. There's a lot of new technologies coming out that are supposed to help you handle them. But I'm just trying to keep it really simple. I don't want to like go down one road and then have to backtrack, because I've already done that quite a few times with these shaders. I was putting them in their own separate, just like text files, and then pathing to them. But that became a problem when I was building the library and linking it with other projects, because now what I would also have to do was I would have to like grab all those shader files and put them with my project as well, and then make sure the path was right. So I'd have to use like the same folders I used. It just was not intuitive at all. Like anyone would get stuck trying to figure out what the heck is going on with these shaders. But if I just put them all internal, then I can just have the library build them on the fly also for your graphics card, because depending on what graphics card and driver you have, it's going to build the binaries differently, potentially. So I can't necessarily just ship binaries, because a lot of things people do is you can actually save the programs that are built, like your graphics shader program. You can save those and reuse them without having to rebuild them every time your program runs. And that's a decent solution, but the problem then becomes, what if your computer doesn't support these pre-built shaders? You need to rebuild them anyway. So they're being rebuilt anytime you run the thing, which isn't a huge deal. They're pretty small shaders. And this also allows me to, in the future, try to do some dynamic stuff depending on what features you're using. So it's not necessarily going to build ones that you're not using and stuff like that. So I could get more into shaders later, but I'll probably do that in my OpenGL series. But for now, yeah, the whole basic point is they are now just automatic, and you don't really have to think about them. Even if you build this library and link it to another project, it's just going to find shaders, and you just won't have to think about it. Whatever features you use, they will just work. I still have to add in like the PBR support stuff that's only partially done. I still don't have like shadows, but I plan on getting to that at some point. There's just so much other stuff, and actually the reorganization of this project has been necessary, because as I kind of expand things and make it a little more consistent, I start to realize that sometimes I've done things in a way that are not scalable or really hard to expand on. So it kind of just requires a refactor before I can even do what I intend. So that seems to be happening a lot. But so that's kind of the point of a lot of these refactors. There's like always refactors, and I personally don't like refactoring, but it's really necessary when you've got things that you want to expand and it just won't work in the way you've done it. So it's just the nature of programming, especially when you're new to this. Like, this is the first game engine I've ever worked on and built, so I'm learning as I go a lot of times, and sometimes I'll just add a feature and not realize that it's going to be a problem in the future, and then I'll have to refactor it. So but it seems like I can definitely tell as I work on this more and more and like make mistakes, definitely learning from these mistakes and realizing, okay, so next time I add a feature in a similar manner, do it this better way. And so it's pretty cool. It's one of the reasons I love doing this. This is just always something to learn, something to take away that could be used on any future project about organizing and stuff. All right, so let's continue. I re-added the full screen toggle support. That's actually like in the core, but it's also in the public header. Not a huge deal. Basically, I had this in like a long time ago, and I kept noticing bugs and glitches with it. But I reread through all the GLFW documentation, and I re-added it, and it seems to work fine now. It could maybe be improved a tiny bit, but it's good enough to not really have to worry about it. It just works. And I added a call face option. This is just an OpenGL thing. I just had it off, and via the library there was no way to toggle it on and off before, so now there's a way to toggle it on and off. Because, well, I kind of noticed this once I started adding some basic textures, which we'll get to in a second. I started adding like all the basic geometry for blocking out levels and stuff like that. And as I was doing that, I noticed that like you could see the plane from both sides, but in like Blender or Unreal or Unity, if you add a plane, you'll notice that you can only see it from one side, and that's because the back side is called. So I just added that on, that way we could call things if we want. And I'll also save on some of the rendering efficiency stuff too. So kind of a thing that should have been added. So there's probably going to be a lot of these little features that I add that are just part of OpenGL that I don't really have the ability to toggle on and off, and that's just because they're not being used in any of the functionality. But as they become necessary, I'm going to add little functions to toggle them on and off. And just one more comment on this whole adding OpenGL functionality. Like obviously this uses OpenGL right now, but I intend on supporting DirectX and Vulkan in the future. So part of this is, yeah, I'm adding functions that literally just call another function. And the point of that is, you know, usually people will say like, don't do that. Just use the function that it's calling and skip the abstraction. But the reason we want to abstract here is because we want to support other renderers in the future. So if I just have a function that toggles call face, I don't have to rewrite that function in the future. I just have it call the proper function for whatever, for DirectX, Vulkan. And that way the function's already there and ready. And once I add in different rendering support, I'll just add a switch statement or something for this and it'll just work. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of thing going on, and it's a lot of what I meant by the organization too earlier. All right, let's talk about the dark launch. I just like saying dark launch. It just sounds whatever. It's just basically stuff that's not ready. Usually it's not in the public header yet, but it's like in the back engine or links. And it's just stuff that's like preparation for future, because I'm trying to do these releases on a time-based thing. So like every week or 2 weeks or maybe a month at the most, I'm going to release a new version no matter where it's at. And some of the stuff just is going to be like in there but not quite ready. So that's kind of the dark launch area, is stuff that's in there but not ready. It's just you know, in an ideal world I would never put anything here, because once I add stuff it would be ready. But if you're like forcing releases on a time-based scale, you're going to have things that you were like working on that you didn't get done, and that's kind of this area. So basically I started adding some more mesh uploader stuff. This is just stuff to push stuff to your graphics card or delete it when you're done. And previously it was all about importing models like FBXs, OBJs, stuff like that. But I started adding in just some basic like raw geometry internally. That way you could like block out levels without having to start designing stuff in Blender. Or I just found it kind of annoying to be like, I need a cube, I guess I've got to go to Blender, make a cube and export it, you know, that sort of thing. I was just like, all right, I don't really want to have to do that. If I just want a cube, can I just like add a cube? It's, you know, it's not that much data. I shouldn't have to bring in a whole model file for it. So that's the whole point of that. We're going to start adding in all this basic geometry, and that'll make it a lot easier to block out levels or whatever you're designing, or if it's a building or whatever. And I also started adding some texture stuff for that. So the point of this is like going forward, we're going to be able to like texture all this raw basic geometry. So you might have a wall that starts out gray or white or whatever, but later you might want to like put a texture on it. And that's basically the point of this little method. Previously it was just like all built into the model importer. So as you import a model, if it had textures, it would automatically do the things with the textures. But now it's still going to do that, but also it's going to let you manually change textures too. Obviously not ready yet, but just something I was like getting ready. All right, other changes. I added the MIT license. I have no idea. One of my pet peeves is reading legal stuff. It's so boring, it's so dry, and it's always just like, it always just has, I don't know. I don't even know how to express this right, but just like legal jargon, and like, it just feels like a big time waster. So I don't care about licenses, but obviously I need something. Otherwise someone's just going to steal all this code and claim it for themselves or whatever. Because I don't know. It's because there's evil people in the world. They're rare, but they exist. Luckily, everyone's been super cool, especially on YouTube, which has kind of surprised me. All right. Other changes. A refactor of the skybox made it a little more efficient. Basically, as I started adding this geometry, I realized that like my skybox was just using a cube. So I was like, okay, well, as I'm adding this cube geometry, why not just make the skybox use the same one, and it'll be more efficient. And add remove plane. Yeah, that was just like a test of the geometry. It's really, actually this is not even ready, but it's in there. And you can add remove planes at will. It still needs a lot of work. It's not really that great yet. So yeah, that's version 4. That's everything. And if you're still hanging around, we'll look at some of the code here. I guess I could just do it in like this way, where I literally go through the changes and what happened. So this was version 3. That's old. Okay, so here's the new stuff. I guess another thing I do that I'm actually not real fond of, I'd like to change in the future, is all this debug print. So if you're in debug mode, there's a lot, the console becomes a lot more verbose. And I don't know, it might be better to have a logger or something, but I don't know. It's more abstractions to make. I'm just trying to keep it simple. I don't really want to have to mess with that a whole lot, so I just kept it really simple, just using console out. In a perfect world, I would probably implement the boost logger library and use those functionalities, but like, how many more things do I want to add to this that are just kind of not even really part of a game engine, you know? I don't know. There's a lot to debate there, but I basically just don't want to make this library bigger for things that have nothing to do with 3D. So like adding loggers and stuff is not huge right now, but it's probably going to be something that's going to have to be done eventually anyway. Remove some unused files, updated lights. I think this was only in the example project. So there's an example project, and I think I changed around some things there. Formatting and light changes. So on any of these, you can always like just click on this and see exactly what was changed. So there was a lot of, I think most of this was just syntax and formatting. I don't think there was really anything super big here. Yeah. You'll see in here a lot of formatting and factor, and most of those are kind of boring changes, just like reorganizing and stuff. But hopefully, the goal was to never have to reorganize. The goal was for it to be organized properly and to not have to reorganize in between these updates and just, you know, add, remove functionality and stuff like that. So the refactor the private core, this is probably the biggest change of this setting, really. It's just doing this core. And let's see. So yeah, all the init and run and shut down, soft reset, all this core engine functionality is basically set in the core, but there's still like public access to it. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it. There's probably some inheritance method I should use, but yeah, I just tried to abstract it out, shrink the size of the main CPP file, and put stuff in there that shouldn't be, put stuff in the core that generally shouldn't be messed with. And this also can mean like, if you're kind of a new developer and just want to peek around and maybe make a few changes, the core is probably not the place to start, because it's like the root functionality that shouldn't be messed with unless you really know what you're doing. But all the other stuff is a little more open. Take that with a grain of salt. That's not necessarily true. You might be just fine going into the core and messing with stuff if you're pretty well studied, or, you know, have a good understanding of what's going on. So I guess, yeah, that's the big thing. Here's the whole new file. It's pretty large, and as you can see, so if you include core.h, you get access to all these functions that are always built in a CPP, and it's being done through extern, but you can't just include the core. Like, this only gets included privately, so there's no public access to this, is basically the point. If you want public access to this, you have to go through the ancient Arche header, which, man, there's a lot of line changes. All right. I don't know if that's in here. But basically, like, you can still init the engine. Like, even though this is fully private, there's a public version of the init, which ends up calling this one. and stuff like that. So yeah, there was some changes to how the init works. It's mostly the same, but it's no longer a init engine. It's just AA init. You just init everything. And that initializes the audio, the graphics, your window, basically everything you need. All right, so yeah, that is definitely by far the biggest change. Refactor skybox, public input structs, cleanup. Oh my. Some of these changes were stuff like that I was working on over several days, and at one point I was finally like, okay, this works good where I'm at. Let's just clean it up a little bit, commit it. So yeah, obviously I put a lot of time and work into this. I refactored a lot of the model loader too. I took out this loader vars. There were a lot of like unused things that I missed in version 3, or a lot of, just a lot of things that were kind of awkward that I might have just been testing and ended up getting changed. All right, texture upload support. Or yeah, we already kind of talked about this, but I'll show you the actual changes here. So basically when you upload a 2D texture now, you can now specify whether it has alpha or not. And so that is something you need to know as you go to upload. And it basically just uses the right one based on your alpha or not. And same for cube maps. You can have a texture, you can have alpha or not. Cube maps is basically what all the skybox uses, but cube maps are also nice for other things too. Like if you have a cube that you want to look like a chest, for example, you're going to need different textures on all 6 sides of the square or cube. So yeah, uploading cube map textures is definitely used for the skybox, but it's going to be used for other things too in the future. So yeah, that's that change. Not super huge. It was probably something I could have done a long time ago, but I just kind of missed it. Change the skybox. I don't know what I did here. Oh, this is literally a different skybox. I pulled one down. There's a site I found. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's just this right here. Yeah. So this is done in WebGL, and you can basically like just get random different skyboxes and you can download them. It's super awesome. www.tyro.github.io/space3d. Pretty nice resource for grabbing these. And being that this is in WebGL, I don't know if anyone has transferred this anywhere else yet, but I was considering like messing with this and like turning it into a C++ project, because I think it's all JavaScript. I don't know, just be something fun to do, to fork it and make it run within a window. It didn't look like it'd be that hard to do. Like all the code's there, it just needs translated a little bit. But it is something I could like add pretty easily or mess with as a side project. So I basically grabbed one of these skyboxes and used it rather than the one I had previously. Formatting and light name changes. Not exactly sure what this is. I think I was just updating and revising some of this light stuff. This looks like it's mostly formatting, but I think I might have fixed a bug or two. Restructure to a more game ready state. I don't know what the heck this is. Oh, this is just the example project. So I started adding in stats. I was going to test around some game logic. I didn't quite get to that yet, but this is just like a basic stat block for something I plan to test implement here. And it gets more into like how you want to design a game type logic, but obviously you need hit points, MP for magic points, energy, focus, armor, dodge, resistance. That seemed like enough to start. Plenty. And I have some theory written out on some paper about how all this would like interact, but that's for a later day and probably for my own little personal project later. There's the toggle full screen stuff. This was actually pretty interesting to add. So there's the public header. There's access to it in the public header. And there's the build of it. And as you can see, it just calls these core functions. So it's kind of weird because it's like double abstracted. And I didn't necessarily like this, but I couldn't think of a better way to do it because the end user still needs access to it, but I don't want this whole function built within Ancient Archer. I want it built within the core. So, because this here is a private file, you can only access these functions through whatever's available in this header. But like these functions, basically if it calls any functionality from OpenGL or GLFW or any other library, if it calls functionality directly from something else, it goes into the core. So I don't want like this ancientarcher.cpp to have raw OpenGL functions and raw GLFW functions. So if they have those, it instead calls core, which calls all that stuff, because core has GLFW and OpenGL headers and all that, but these Ancient Archer ones should not, because it's abstracted away. So that was also another point of the core. Still working on that, but I think it makes a little more sense and it's a little cleaner to work on already. It did cut down like 1,000 lines of code from this file. This file is just getting huge. Yeah, so when you toggle full screen, well, this is kind of just temporary for now, but basically it just keeps track of whether or not you're currently full screen and flips it as you toggle it. Pretty straightforward, but ultimately this ends up calling the core set full screen because that's a GLFW thing. All right, what else we got? Yeah, here they are. Alt R. So if you okay, so here's the function, and you can set it to true or false. So set window full screen, true or false. If you set it to true, it does this. But first, we need to get like stuff about the windowing mode and the primary monitor. So it does operate off your primary monitor. I haven't added in or abstracted out the support for multiple monitors yet. I don't know if I'm going to. I don't feel like that's super necessary in the game. Usually you're just working off one window and you full screen your window that you're playing the game on. I don't intend on supporting more than one monitor, but I could. There's no reason I couldn't. It just seems like a lot of work for something that nobody will ever use. Yeah, I think this is fine. I actually changed this later. There's more changes to this later because I think I fixed it up a little more. Like this don't care. This is the refresh rate. But you want to match the refresh rate of your monitor. So actually I think this is change to mode refresh rate when you go to full screen, and this one's don't care. Because if you set it to your refresh rate, it toggles much quicker, and if you have a really high refresh rate monitor, you can get those super high frame rates as everybody wants. All right. And if you toggle it off, it just, okay, so this was a little tricky. There's a little formula here to get to the middle of the screen. When you toggle it off, it basically puts your window back to the default size in the middle of the screen. I considered like saving your last window width, and last window height, and then flipping it back to what you last had it at, but it was getting complicated and it was just more and more lines of code were getting added. And I was like, look, I'm just going to set it back to the default when they unfull screen. And you can resize from there however you want, so it's not that big of a deal. It's like full screen or windowed, you choose. This function should allow that. All of course, just, you know, Windows change functions that are built into Windows 10 or Linux or whatever you're using, will work fine when you're not windowed. So if you want to maximize it, it all works. But there's no way to full screen with Windows. You literally have to have some kind of function to do this whole thing here. Yeah, I think that's about it on here. There's maybe some other little fixes and stuff and formatting, but okay, yeah. So from this one, I noticed once I started testing it that there was this bug where if you had the screen maximized and went to full screen and then turned off full screen, the window would still be considered maximized, but it would not be maximized. So I think there's maybe a little glitch in GLFW on that they might be able to fix, but it's not that big of a deal. I basically, what did I do? Let me even see. Oh, I basically keep track of whether it was maximized or not. If it was maximized, then we call this restore window, and that basically fixes that little maximized bug. And there's the mode refresh rate. That way it can match the hertz of your monitor. Fixed warning, internalized core shaders. I already talked about that. Again, I'll show you that real quick though. Raw shader file added. These are huge diffs. Deleted the GSL files because they're now all within this core or raw shader. And as you can see, these are just const strings and they're raw literals. It's still, you know, one of the annoying limitations of putting them in C files was you had to put the slash new line at the end of these. But if you use this raw string, then you don't have to do that. And it makes them very easy to edit within a header. So yeah, that alleviated a lot of the pain of editing them within a shader. I think this is nothing big. There's license. I think this is just an example project. I think I wasn't. So the timed out keyboard functionality, you're supposed to return true if you hit a key that requires a timeout, like an unspammable key. And I think I wasn't returning in one or two functions where I had it set. Call face option added. This is simple OpenGL stuff. It's basically, you can set it, set true or false. If you set true, it turns it on. If you set false, it turns it off. Just abstract it out. So like I was saying earlier, later once we have other renders available, we can add some logic to this to say, hey, use the right one basically. Set texture method. So previously this was all done within functions, and now this being abstracted out is going to make it easier for designing functions in the future, because there's a bunch of texture banks and you want to activate them and bind them before you draw. So this just does it all in one. You just tell it which one, and then you give it the texture ID, and it just does it. Not a huge deal. A little abstraction. New upload mesh method for basic geometry. Yeah, I was working on these. These aren't exactly done, but refactor original render, new render overload for basic geometry. Spelled it wrong. Oh well. Remove anim shader types. Yeah, animations aren't in here yet. Still mess with those. Like I had them working at one point, but it was not it was not good. There were some issues, so I'm just gonna push that back, but eventually we will get animations going in here. Basic plane. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. There's the plane methods. We can look at those real quick. So it's in the header. So yeah, you can use it publicly. I don't know if this should be public yet. It's not really quite properly functional. I was just testing it. But basically, when you add one, you tell it whether it's lit or not, which actually doesn't really matter right now because there's no normals on this plane. I need to add normals to it still. So if it's lit, it uses a lit shader. Otherwise, diff shader to make sure they're set up, of course, because we need to do that. And we just have a big list of planes that we draw if they're added. And we do have an option to remove those, which I added too. See, I'm trying to find the code. So yeah, it just stores a vector of planes for now. And yeah, this render function, I've worked on this render function a lot. It's always being changed and adjusted. I noticed there were some glitches. I don't even remember what they were exactly, but basically the way I was reasoning about this, updating the shaders, something was a little weird with it. I think oh yeah, if your camera was empty, I needed to make sure the view matrix was set. But I don't think I want to support empty cameras, at least not in that way. I mean, empty camera's fine, but like, what should you get if you don't add a camera, you know, if you just try to run the engine without adding a camera? So I had to think about that. And basically what I want to do is leave it default, but I don't know, still kind of considering. The default being your position or your view position is, 000 if you don't add a camera and you're looking down the z-axis. But then you need to think about things like, okay, so is it going to be perspective or is it going to be orthographic? I haven't really considered all that yet because mainly this engine is for 3D. It has pretty limited 2D support. Yeah, it does have pretty limited 2D support. It's really intended for 3D, but it wouldn't be that hard for me to add some 2D support. I just have to think about how I'm doing these cameras a little bit. I think I had it all in there at one point. I took it out because it wasn't working as I intended, so that seems to happen a lot. All right, and there's the whole plane drawer thing. Plane has its own draw method so that it just handles it, but you do need to set the view matrix, and it just does it from the front camera. This is really a hack. This is like really a bad set of code, because what if there's no front camera? It's just going to try to do it and throw an error basically, and it's going to say like null reference or something like that, because camera's going to be empty and there's no front view matrix. But so yeah, basically the engine assumes you add one main camera, but it's not really explicit. So it's something I need to change in upcoming versions, is just how this whole camera thing works and whether you really need one or not. Because what if you never intend to move and you just want to work with your screen space? I haven't fully reasoned that out. It's basically intended that you have one camera and that it's in perspective. And that's just kind of how it's made to work right now. So we'll see going forward. Also, one day when this is like more usable and people start building stuff with it, it's going to be it's going to make a lot more sense for Earth. I'm trying to think of what the right way to word this, but basically it's going to be a lot easier for me to figure out what features I need to make sure I support and what people are trying to use. And because right now it's just like me goofing around, and whatever I feel like needs changed or added, that's what I do. I don't think there's anyone else who uses this right now. There's just a lot better game engines. Obviously, I'm just doing this one from scratch, so it is purely a learning experiment and experience. So that's the point of it, really. So if you're wanting to get into game engines, no idea where to start, this would probably be a good place to like just play around and kind of figure out some basics. It's a conglomeration of many tutorials and many lessons learned, all just being coded up. All right, I think that's all the main stuff for this one. There is what is this, load plane. There's some basic upload a plane. So yeah, you're going to see like load plane, load cube, load whatever. And it's just some really basic geometry with some indices. And I do need to put normals and stuff in here too, but it's not like that yet. So that'll be later. But also the point of this is anytime you need a plane, you have the geometry available. You just call load plane and grab this return value, and it is the VAO to the plane. Because it only sets once. If you call it again, it's just going to return the one that's already loaded. That way you don't reload the same geometry over and over. You can just reuse this as you need. Yeah, I guess that's basically it. And support to remove the plane in case you're no longer using it. Just goes off the UID. So these planes have a unique ID. I don't know if I talked about this before, but there's like a little unique ID system. So any like model or geometry or anything, when you add it to like your world, it's given a unique ID. And if you want to look it up, or if you want to remove it, or if you want to access it or change it, a lot of times you have to access it by its unique ID. And it's sort of just a hacky thing that I did to be able to keep track of stuff and add and remove stuff without like getting completely lost. There's a lot more I could talk about that. It's a very simple system when you get down to it. There's not a whole lot to it other than things get unique IDs, and anything that has unique ID often has functions that require you, like if you want to remove a plane, this is going to check the vector of planes, but also it's like which one. It could, as your game goes on and things change, its spot within the vector could change. Like it could start out as the second element, but later become the first element. So you can't necessarily just say it's element 1 or 2 or 3 in the vector because it might move. So rather than that, they just have unique IDs, and you say, hey, the plane with this unique ID, do something with it. In this case, it's a remove, but like with the props, they use unique IDs too, and they're used for like moving them around. It's not super efficient, but it doesn't seem to matter yet because I haven't built any big scale things where it matters. It's plenty fast enough for what it is. What else we got here? Oh yeah, this is just testing the plane. All right, so let's run the engine. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to put it in release mode so it builds a little faster. And this is running the example project here, which I've somewhat refactored. And yeah, it's going to change every update, but basically it's just something to test with and just make sure everything's working. So you can see the new skybox here. It's more of a, might be really hard to see on YouTube, but basically my screen's really bright, so it's not too bad for me to see. It's just one of the skies from that thing, and here's our classic peasant man still spinning. We've got a little bit of light from a directional light that's supposed to sort of emulate that moon sun thing or whatever it is. But there's also a flashlight you can toggle with F, and the lighting should work a lot better now. I still have to do some work on the model loading light because I don't think all the specular and normal textures work right now. But it looks half decent with spotlights and stuff. You can get away with it. There's also no shadows, so not the best. Here's our plane. I just tested adding it. So, and if we go below it and look up, you'll see that it's gone, and that's because the back face culling. So that seems to work. I added the culling on that, so you can't see it at all if you're below it. But going above it, where it is, there it is. All right, and I added a hotkey to remove it and add it back. Just testing it out there. Add remove works fine. So we could, in theory, add remove anything on the fly. That's one of the points of this. All the stuff that you see within the scene can be like changed on the fly. That's the point of it being a game, because when you're in a game, like you're going to different levels and stuff, and it needs to support that, and it does. I didn't mess with the audio at all, but all the audio works fine. So I don't think there's any audio in this scene right now. All right, and full screen. Toggle that. Looks like it takes a while to show up on OBS. But yeah, toggling full screen works pretty good. Toggle back off. Goes to the center. Still got that little inventory thing going on. Oh, I guess there's sound with that. So as you can see, that hover, I didn't change anything with that, so obviously it works. But another thing this does is I put some logic in here to make the mouse stop moving around your camera when you open your inventory, because you need to be able to click and stuff and whatever you want to do, All right, well, I think that's about it. New month, new version. All right, well, appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think below. All the stuff about the bounties does still apply for now. I just haven't changed that. It's under projects here. I know a few people like forked it and were messing with it a little bit, but yeah, I think, did I add any of this stuff myself? Haven't got the shadow mapping, haven't got the HDR skies. I think I know how to do this though. I might do this for the next version. Sound effect, distance tuning. I didn't mess with that. Music loop, and I haven't messed with that. Yeah, I haven't messed with like any of the stuff. Water bodies. I think this is going to be part of, I don't know. I have some ideas for how to add this, but basically you could make a texture that goes along with like the planes or squares, and you could like custom water bodies and stuff, but I don't know. It's not in there at all yet. I have some ideas to make some hacky water bodies that would look maybe have these 3D model animations. Yeah, I've messed with that. So yeah, I literally haven't messed with any of these feature bounty stuff, but getting to the point where I kind of know how to do some of these. Well, some of them I definitely know how to do. Like I already know how to do the sound just tuning. I'm pretty sure I know how to fix this looping issue. Just haven't done it, just been working on other things. So yeah, I have some pretty decent ideas about how to approach all of these. But if you get to it first and you make a pull request, I will, and it works, and I accept a pull request, I will send you whatever this bounty is. It's not a whole lot, but hey, if it's easy for you and know how to do it, it's like easy money, you know, and you get some practice and some GitHub points and all that. So at some point, if these sit for a long time or there's some that I just can't figure out, I'll probably increase the bounty if no one's done it at that point. Alright, appreciate you guys. And is there anything else? Oh yeah, as I said at like the beginning of this video, this project is my own personal project. It's not part of Code Tech Tutorials. It's just a library I like talking about, and I think there's a lot to learn from it. So if you want to sponsor this project, you can. It just goes to my personal Patreon or Coffee. I'm not sure about these yet. I haven't really pushed these at all, but this is just like a basically the whole point is this is my own personal project. If you want to support it, it's actually kind of separate from the channel, because like, I don't know, say in 10 years if I get banned from YouTube or something, it's gonna have nothing to do with this project. Just is the point. I don't know. So a little separation there. Like, I started this project before I started YouTube, so there's that too. Alright, well, yeah, that's all I can think about to talk about right now. Let me know what you guys think. Peace out.